This is LifeStreams, capturing our history, championing kingdom values, creating a path for future generations. Today, Debbie sits with Anu Silas, who shares her inspiring journey. You'll be touched as you hear her story of coming to serve the Lord by caring for widows and orphans in need across India.
Hi, everyone. We're so happy to be back with you today. We have the privilege of having a very special friend from India with us, and we're going to hear the story of Anu Silas. We met Anu probably 25 years ago when we were serving in India with our family, and we now have her with us in our home for a week, and we're so thrilled to let her share her story with you. So, Anu, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Debbie.
We would love to hear your story right from the beginning of how God has had his hand on you. Why don't you share with us?
Wonderful. I'm just so excited to meet you and be with you after all these years. And what an honor and privilege to share my story with you today. As I've probably shared with you, Debbie, that I was raised in an orphanage at the age of 10 months old, left with by my mother at the orphanage. And that's where I grew up. So, yeah, I've heard about Jesus many, many times of how great God's love is for me. But it really didn't touch my heart because I felt like I was growing up in an orphanage with 2,000 girls, being so lost, and really found myself to be a miserable child, not belonging to anyone. So I remember seeing myself or putting myself to bed every night crying, feeling left and lost. So just being a miserable child. And I grew up in an orphanage till age 16.
What happened at 16? Were you out on your own after that?
I was displaced at the age of 16. But before that, just to be honest, possible, growing up with 2,000 girls at the orphanage, Debbie, as you can imagine, it's not easy. And I had found a place right at the center of the orphanage where that place where I could hide and cry and just be there, having my own space. And I remember there were a number of times that I couldn't find friends. So I was very lonely. And there was abuse, even though it was a Christian orphanage, and physical abuse, and the trauma and the shame that came to me as just being an orphan girl. So even though the orphanage gave me the best of education opportunities, I felt like I just couldn't make friends. And
Anu, I can't even imagine what you went through as a child. I think most of us can't imagine what it would be like to grow up in an orphanage with 2,000 other girls. Mm-hmm. So you've shared with us the loneliness, the isolation, the feeling like you didn't belong anywhere. How did those things affect God's call on your life into ministry?
I remember at the age of 8, out of desperation, I gave my life to Jesus. Okay. And I had heard about his love for me. And I'm like, if this Jesus is real, why not meet him? And I would go in those hiding places right at the center of the orphanage. And I would pray. And I remember praying out, saying, Lord, if you are real, please show up. I would love to see you. Well, I didn't see Jesus, but I met Jesus at the age of 8. And I remember God called me saying that you would be a mother to many children. It didn't make sense because I was miserable. I needed a mother. I needed a father. I wanted desperately a family that I would belong to. After giving my life to Jesus and I heard God speak to me so clearly, things did not change around me. But there was something that God planted into my heart. And I had a different outlook altogether on my life. I began to look among the girls that I lived with, and I felt sorry. I saw the misery that they had. And I feel like my heart began to be more sensitive to the issues around me. And I feel that God began to work towards the seed that He had planted in my heart. So that's how I believe the call of my ministry and the vision that God gave me began. Life hasn't been easy then. It had to be a journey of many ups and downs. But I remember when I committed my life to Jesus, something changed inside of me.
Isn't that just the goodness of God, that in the midst of so much pain and aloneness, that Jesus would meet you as a child? I love that. And so how has that affected the direction that you went in ministry? Tell us a little bit more about how things developed.
Yeah. I remember at the age of 16, the orphanage that I grew up had felt the need of placing me into a government home. And that really was not a pleasant experience. As growing up in a Christian orphanage, in more of a family setting, you are exposed to a facility that's government-owned, which means you are among those children who have been in conflict with the law, murderers and different background. And I was really shocked and terrified to be in that facility. Well, as a story of Joseph in the Bible, I would imagine that God placed me there for a reason or a purpose. The lady superintendent of that government home, she really kept an eye on me. First, she thought I would create some trouble, but later on she saw me working hard or whatever. Probably it's the favor of God that she really felt that I had the privilege of doing further studies or other privilege as well.
So you were able to be educated then and did you go to university?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did continue with my further education, and there were more opportunities there. So as I said, with the story from the Bible of Joseph, I saw God's favor constantly on my life. She gave me charge of many things, gave me an auxiliary nursing training, through which I was placed to work among the infant babies, and I would work night shifts with these little children that were rescued by the police officers or social workers in Mumbai. And I remember one particular child that was rescued from a trash bin, probably a premature baby girl, and it was all eaten by some creatures. It looked horrible. And that child came into our facility, and we nursed that child back into health. But that was a moment God reminded me of what seed He had planted into my heart. That was a reminder for my call. This is what I'm called to do. I was so glad to see that child nursed back into health and eventually be adopted in Denmark. So I remember that was a point where I'm like, God, what is it? And starting off the ministry of me coming back to Pune and meeting my husband in Pune, we shared the same vision, and we just trusted God, prayed, and we prayed, and I think all of it, the vision that was birthed to prayer in 1995.
Isn't it amazing how God can work all things together for good? The pain of your background,
Absolutely.
And then He puts in your heart to reach out to those in a similar situation, and how God has used that. Praise the Lord for that. So tell us about the ministry today. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, Debbie, as you know, you've known me and Silas, and when we came together, we have beautiful 2 daughters with us. And the ministry of Vanitashray simply is a Sanskrit word which says shelter, hope for women, for girl child. And we saw this birth in Pune at that particular time, when we had a first call from some place, some village in India, asking Silas to come right away, rescue this girl child who was sexually abused by her father, and in a very horrible condition. an alcoholic father who wanted to sell this child for $40. That's like 2,000 rupees in India. And Silas went off. He brought this child, tied close to his belly, comes home, and I look at this child. I'm terrified just looking at this little girl. She was 3 years old. Her skin sticking to her bones, eyes just staring. She was in so much pain that she could not cry. And it took a lot of time for us to take her to the hospital, nurse her back to health. It was a slow process. But gradually we saw that child, heal. Not until just about 6 months to a year, she literally crawled and couldn't even walk. So, yeah, that was our first child.
So tell us more about this child. Did she survive?
Yes, Debbie. To make the long story short, now this child grew up to be the most vibrant, amazing girl, being the first child into our care and facility. Today she's married. She's a mother of 3 boys, amazing family, and I get to be a grandmother to her children. And so we've seen several girls come just as difficult and out of desperation. I remember one of the girl was left really at on the streets of Pune, and we rescued her. She could have nearly died because she had worms in her stomach. Her head is big. She's 3 years old, but she looked like a 6-month-old baby. So these are different stories and girls that were rescued through difficult circumstances that came into our facility. We raised those children, 5 of them by the time probably in 2001, and we had 2 widows living with us. Now, very unfortunately, my husband was suffering from some physical sickness. We didn't know back then, but he got a stroke in 2001. He was hospitalized for 10 days. And 10th of May in 2001, Silas passed away. He's gone to be with the Lord. And I was mother of 2 children. My own biological daughters were 2 and 6. And we had all these children at the orphanage. So it was a very devastating time at that particular time. I have no idea, if not for God's grace, how I would make it so far. So that's where, yeah.
Anu, we remember Silas from our early days in India, and what a vibrant couple you were in the training that you were leading at the time. And I can't even imagine what it was like for you when he passed and went on to be with Jesus. Is there any special things you can share with us of how the Lord met you during especially the early days of your being a widow?
Yeah. As I mentioned, Debbie, it was very devastating for me to lose Silas. We had had a beautiful marriage of 7 years, 2 beautiful daughters, and we had so much hope and excitement of seeing this vision come through, waited and waited for such a long time. Although many times I thought there are challenges and is this really God-given vision? But Silas, being a man of faith, he said, no, this is what God has called us to do. So we believed and we stepped forward. But at the time when I lost Silas, I was back to questioning the Lord. I mean, Lord, is this the vision that you gave me? If you have given me this ministry, why this? Why would I lose my husband? Weren't we supposed to do this ministry together? And I had no idea, how I would survive with my 2 children. And then all these children that I had taken on. It had to be the Lord. I remember pulling myself back, literally shutting myself for a week behind those shut doors. I had to allow myself to hear God speak to me in that moment. And God did speak to me through Isaiah 54 verse 10. The word says that though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, yet my unfailing love and the covenant of peace will not be shaken, says the Lord who has compassion on you. And I remember more than just feeling the presence, I knew the Lord said it is just about my relationship with you. It's not all the extra things that you're going to do. it's not just about the ministry, but it's the relationship, the presence of the Lord, the compassion that He placed in my heart. And when I had the sense that God had spoken to me, I began to take one day at a time, just continuing with the ministry that He gave. So, yeah, I think all these years we've seen it's really functioning from the best place of being connected with God to see the fruit that we see today.
I think what you're sharing with us is something that we all need to hear, that no matter what the circumstances end up being in our lives, it's always about our hearts, isn't it? It's always about our relationship with the Lord. And when that is in alignment and when that is in a good place, then the Lord can do whatever He wants to in us and through us on behalf of other people. And I'm sure, Anu, that what you went through, nothing is wasted in the kingdom.
Yeah.
And the Lord obviously has used you, and just the compassion that you have for people, the understanding of suffering from what you've gone through, including losing Silas, has added extra layers and dimensions to your spiritual authority in the ministry that He has you in. So tell us what you're doing today.
Yeah. So as you know, being an orphan and being a widow in our cultural setting, that's having several strikes against you as a woman, as considered in India. Culturally, a woman basically has no value. And if you look back, you've lived in India, you know, a cow has greater value than a woman. Just as we see the circumstances and challenges, the preference over male child over a girl child. And I remember when I stepped into the ministry, the ignorance and unwantedness of all those girls in India. No wonder God would place us with this vision to take care of His daughters, precious lives of those many girls who otherwise would have no chance of living and were placed in our care. And I'm so grateful. Though there are many cultural challenges, it's like stepping out in faith to look at those cultural norms. How can we redeem those cultures with the Word of God? How can we reclaim the dignity of women? As I went through my journey of seeing or being treated as of no value, you're like a second-class citizen. If you are a widow, you are probably not invited in social gatherings because you don't bring good luck. And these are belief systems, as you can imagine. Everything and anything that we move about in life is strongly based on our myths and beliefs that come from strong Hindu religious beliefs that we carry so much, and we had to break those. That's been my journey, is how can you really see that transformation, that redeeming of culture happen in one life to see many other women set free. So that's the journey. As of today, reaching out to the women and many of those orphan and vulnerable children in India to see a transformation of communities and lives of those children happen.
We have experienced those challenges in many parts of the world, but I must say that in India, it's so out front and it's so right in front of our faces all the time. And to confront those cultural values and to replace them with biblical values and how God says that He sees people is totally transforming to people who are on the receiving end of it. So, Anu, do you have children, lots of children living with you now?
That's a good question, Debbie. Well, for 14, 15 years of our ministry in Pune, we have seen 56 girls go through our residential program. Most of these girls have moved on in life, finished education. Most of them are married, have children, have their beautiful families. So I'm honored to be a grandmother sitting here with you as I talk about my girls. after we saw those girls moving out through our residential care, somewhere God spoke to me, or I had a sense of where this orphanage or the ministry to the orphans going to move forward with. How is it going to look like? And I never was convinced that orphanage is the solution, is the right solution, because I grew up in an orphanage and I never wanted to start an orphanage. So back then when we thought of orphan care, that was the only solution. And therefore we ended up starting an orphanage. But here I am, after 15, 14 years, I'm thinking, God, is this what we are supposed to continue on? God did speak to me. God began to show things. That particular time, I remember in 2014 is when we began to really look through what are the other possibilities, what are the alternative care towards orphans and vulnerable children. I met this person, and I believe that it was a divine appointment from God. He came into India talking about foster care. Now, all these years later, we still have a difficulty to accept that concept because it's still a foreign concept. I was introduced to a global movement called World Without Orphans, and I was invited to the Global Forum in Chiang Mai, where I began to look at other different models of care. And there was this person from Sri Lanka who had just begun to transition all his residential care programs towards family-based care programs. And I met this wonderful person. I'm like, this is it. God, this is what you are leading me on. I go back home, talk to the board of trustees, began to communicate to the donors. This is what the Lord is speaking to us. This is where we see our future. And amazingly, they supported that decision, and we began to shift our residential care program to a more family-based program where children would stay with their own families. How do we look at the potential of these children coming into orphanages? Is from the very marginalized families where economic challenges, greatest poverty, lack of education, abuse, and there are a number of reasons why a child would be placed in an orphanage through these vulnerable families.
So are you saying that the kids that would come into the orphanage were not necessarily actual physical orphans, but they were abandoned by their families because of poverty or other situations going on at home?
Right.
So the new strategy is to work with the families?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
Absolutely. As I saw, number of children that came to our residential care, probably 40-50% of those girls were biologically orphans, which means both their parents had died. And to see an orphan is basically, if the child has lost both his parents. So in other circumstances, we had girls who had probably one or both their parents, or if not both their parents, a grandmother, somebody from their own family still living, yet capable to take care of these girls. So when we began to do research, going back to the communities where these girls potentially came from, we saw that there is high possibility, and culturally, just as family-oriented culture that we have, God began to open our eyes to see, why don't we come alongside of these families? How can we strengthen these families and even create that awareness that how important a child is to remain with their families? And
So your work now is then working with the local families of those children that have a parent or a grandparent still there and able to care for them. And so how are you encouraging them? Is it training in hygiene and food and family dynamics? What exactly do you do?
Right. So, Debbie, when we began the shift from the residential care, from an orphanage to community-based care, we had done research towards how marginalized, what are the challenges, What are the factors that push these families to, in fact, place these children in orphanages when they are not orphans? As you know, that there is such a stigma with the word orphan, and children can live lifelong with that stigma. How can we go back to the families? Well, we began to connect with those families who were the most marginalized. We began to create awareness of what is safety, what is safeguarding your children, where there's potential abuse that's happening. How can we work along with the system and factors that pull us together? Because it does not take one entity, one individual. How can we collaborate together to create that safe community where a child can remain safe in a loving home? And that's how we began to come around those families. By then, we had placed our community centers right in the middle of those slums, where we began to take children into our daycare facilities. We began to start feeding programs for a number of these children, create skill development training for women, and economic strengthening. How can we bring self-help groups? So lots of potential, lots of programs that we began to create in the community, owned by the community people. And just about same amount of money that we were spending on 15 and 20 girls at the orphanage, we began to put those resources and ended up catering to the needs to more than 2,000 families in one community.
2,000 families.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like such a God strategy.
And the whole purpose is to get these families, financially capable enough to take care of the needs of their own children, and to be able to keep those children safe with their own families.
So have you started income generation projects to train the family members, or how have you gone about that?
Yeah.
From the financial side.
Right. So now we have not just one center, but we have 8 communities, large slums of Pune, that are given by the government to us in order to start those community centers, skill development centers where women come for morning shifts, learn wire basket making programs, tailoring projects, a number of productions that we began to create, sell them and make an income, and where a woman can at least have a decent amount of salary or income, as they would say, to take care of these children and families. We also sponsor children in schools and education. Alcoholic fathers, how can we come around those? As we collaborate with organizations in Pune, we connect them to facilities and programs where these men can be going through various programs and facilities where they can be placed. So we are dealing with not just an issue of child being safe, how can that entire family be catered towards keeping it safe and together, in a sense building that entire community. So I think this is more than we have ever planned before, or it's just an expansion. So now it's not just us as an organization, but we have a number of these organizations coming together, pulling resources together, working towards the community. And how can we even bring the church alongside? So the government is involved, the education system is involved, we have business people. So it takes all these spheres of society coming together. As it said, it takes a whole village to raise that one particular child. So that's how we are just collaborating together and making sure that these children are safe and belonging to loving families. And then the families are strengthened and the communities are transformed and the communities are strong and in India. Yeah.
What an awesome testimony. Anu, what are the needs that you see going forward? Are you working towards a center from which to organize all of this?
Wow. So Debbie, now as you know, this year we've completed 25 years of Vanitashray. It's amazing. It's the grace of God. We've come so far. Our vision does not stop there. It's more exciting for what the future is going to look like. And I have greatest anticipation to see what the Lord is about to do. Now, we've gone ahead and bought this huge property, which eventually had been given to us to build an orphanage. Well, as I mentioned, that I was never convinced to build an orphanage. I did not want to duplicate from the care and facility that I was raised as an orphan. But looking at the possibility, how can we cater to the needs of families? As we brought this property, we are really excited to see that the building plan has been sanctioned by the government. So we would potentially in the next 2-3 years see these buildings happen. So far we have rented properties and the centers are run on money that goes down the drain. It's not coming back. But we are hopeful that if we build these centers, we would be providing jobs for many, many women. Think about all those families that are going to be strengthened. Think about those number of children that are going to have education in our facility, counseling centers, training center, and just creating greater opportunity and a lifelong established work of Vanitashray. So I'm so excited and so hopeful. I have no clue, but I trust the Lord. He's going to do it.
It's been such a joy to hear Anu's story as she has unfolded this ministry that God has led her to. There's something that has impacted me deeply as we've reconnected with Anu. In James chapter 1, it talks about how true religion is taking care of orphans and widows. And it struck me a few days ago that Anu herself was an orphan and a widow. And yet God has taken this life and brought so much restoration and healing that she is now reaching out to orphans and widows. I think that's such a kingdom picture of God's redemption, and I don't want to lose that as we finish our time together. So thank you for being with us today. If you would like to be in touch with Anu, the website is across the bottom of the page, and make sure and click the subscribe button so that you don't miss future episodes. Thank you for joining us in LifeStreams.
This is LifeStreams. If you've enjoyed today's session, be sure to like, comment, and share. And of course, you'll want to hit the subscribe button below so you never miss a new episode. Thank you for joining us.